Hello and welcome back to Explosive Kolonisation. Now, to start us off today, I just thought I'd actually show a little bit more of this ship. I designed this because I was having a conversation with Angel125 on the forums. And I was sort of trying to explain how I like to build ships and some of the parts that I like. So that's where this actually came from, but it turns out it's a very good delivery ship. Even though it's a standard, a chemically fueled delivery ship, but it can get a lot of things out to the scrap heap station, which is what it's done. And it also has the ability to carry an awful lot of Kerbals in cryo and do longer distance trips. It has a good amount, an okay amount of life support, but a lot of cryo capability. So I just thought I'd show this as we're bringing it back down to Kerbal. We're putting on a return trajectory. So there we go, just sort of showing everything that's inside it. Now that that's done, actually it wasn't done, I overcorrected here as you can see. So I have to turn around and recorrect that. But once that is done, we are on to another launch. So this here is a tiny little rocket that I designed for very light ships. Basically KISS modules. Again, this is using the little section you can see in the front is the KNES module. Or one of the KNES modules. This is a lighter one. It carries 2 Kerbals and has a good amount of KISS ability. So I can send it up to change parts on things, and that's exactly what this one is doing. I need a little bit of Kerbal inventory support. But I kept this in because not often do I keep landing my rockets in when I'm using recoverable rockets. Mainly because they usually don't recover that well. I always seem to get an explosion of some kind. However, for this one, I thought I'd demonstrate what was going on, so I filmed the entire thing, and you never believe what happened, it actually worked. So here we are, just coming in retrograde, and all I do is turn on the engine and deploy the chutes, and leave it on prograde, because obviously I'll lose control here, so I don't have any control, but it knows to stay prograde. So the reaction wheel, the slight reaction wheel, is just keeping it tipped that way. And obviously, as you can see there, it has multiple fuel tanks, so all of the fuel for the re-entry is actually in the bottom tank, keeping it tail heavy. Once I get control, out with the air brakes, drop the parachutes, drop the gear. Now I know if I was SpaceX I'd be doing this a lot closer to the ground to make it look nice and to affect the air stabilisation. But I don't have to because I've got chutes as well. But this comes down quite nicely on its tail, and luck of all lucks we managed to pick an actual flat place for it. So a little bit of retro propulsion because these don't land just on chutes, they need both, which is taken care of by the recovery mod, but when I'm doing it, there we go. An actual bona fide perfect landing for once, and you can see by me panning the camera that I was genuinely surprised as well. So there we go, look how pretty it is. Okay, onwards. So we have our little KISS module that's going up. Now this is going to the Avatar, as you can see there as it arrives. And the reason for this is, obviously this ship is built to take certain other ships, certain other parts out to Lathe. That's the one, I was searching for the word. And as part of that, I need it to be more rigid when it goes out there. So I need to attach some of the KISS struts to it so that I can lock everything in place. And as you can see there, I forgot that this little tiny module doesn't have RCS, and I had to do the old school manly approach as it's known. So here we are onto the OPT plane. As you can tell, this is a fairly large and heavy plane. The engines are upscaled. And it's quite long and big, and yeah, it's nice and fun to fly. But this is one of our Lathe ships. So once we get it up to the Avatar, now as you can see here, this looks really nice. It's almost like somebody told me about the ambient light mod. So thanks to MW Sin on the Tape Gaming video, he left a comment for me telling me what the mod was. And yeah, we can actually see things in the dark now, which means I don't have to be professional and wait for the daylight side. Not that I ever did that before. But yeah, so we can see what's going on. We're just docking this huge ship, and this one actually went surprisingly well. as you can see, I'm actually, for a change, I'm actually doing it manually, and that's because these things are so heavy that MechJeb cannot handle them. So you have to go a lot slower than it's used to, and yeah, it's easier to do it manually. Although I love MechJeb, you can't use it all the time, you need to know how to fly as well. So here's a little kiss struts. And just showing what you do here, you just basically plonk them out, attach them, using the attachment system. And as you can see, I'm doing 4 there, obviously there's going to be 2 of these planes. And then you just grab the strut, as if you were grabbing a pipe, just normal pipe connector. And then pull it across and click it on. And now that works just the same as the normal strut. So that's attached now beautifully. Now I'm not sure about undocking, whether that'll break the strut or not. We shall see. But yeah, so that's rigid in place, which is good. It means that there's no flex in the docking port when I'm actually shifting this thing. And I've put on both the struts now, so it's time to recover this little craft. Those little monopropellant engines in the back that you can see are part of the Wild Blue Industries. And oh god, they are brilliant. They have an eject function that you're supposed to use if you want to eject your capsule as part of the launch escape system. I highly recommend those. They are great fun. Unless you press a button by accident. The less said about that the better. So as I'm coming through here, I happen to notice that I'm going through the Badlands. And the Badlands is one place on Kerbal I don't have science from. So I started slamming back and trying to turn around. I figured if I'm going to land there, I might as well pick up a ground report. A while back, in fact in the previous thing, I tried to launch some crafts to get there and I never managed to do it. So the Badlands is the one place on Kerbal I don't have science from. And obviously I'm trying to grab as much science as possible, so I figured I'd loop round. I shoot out of the Badlands as I'm trying to pull the loop, but I try and see if I can glide back. And there we go, I've managed to cross back into the Badlands, as you can see. And this just explains why I did this landing. It means that I'll get absolutely nothing for recovering this ship, but I still get a bit of science, which is worth a good amount. So because it's rough ground, I slam the parachute into the ground, and then I pick up the science. And unfortunately I have to send the science straight back to Kerbal instead of sending it to a lab, but what are you gonna do? So out to the next ship. This is the next space plane going to Lathe, the sister ship of the other one. And I cut out an awful lot of the docking here because I tried to use MechJeb. As you can see, the window's open, and oh god did it go horribly wrong. I didn't even take my own advice. But after an hour and a half of trying to dock this, and I only learned that afterwards when I was editing the video, we get it all docked and sorted up, and we turn off everything, turn off all the engines manually, because when you've got multiple ships together you should avoid the action groups. And it gets all linked together, and there we can see the beginnings of the Avatar ship and its crew, its transport, everything it's taking. So we take everybody that's going there and we start putting them into deep freeze. That noise is actually just one person at 4 times speed acceleration. And here's a little internal view because I don't know why. I left it in, I thought it was interesting. So onwards! So now that amount of time left us in a perfect amount of time to get back to Kerbal, so there's a bit of an adjustment. And then a deceleration burn. Now I don't really have a use for this ship at the moment, so it is time to basically just going to leave it sitting here abandoned in orbit. So I'm leaving it in a fairly low orbit, and now back onto the Avatar. So I have some things to send up to the Avatar, and I thought, why not use a shuttle? Why not? So this is actually Matt Lone's shuttle. I downloaded it ages and ages ago, and it's been transferred to all the ships I've copied between game updates. And I saw it and I thought, actually I can use that exact part that's inside it, because I need a science lab. So I thought, why not? So these are really tricky. As you can see, I'm starting to flip it, and the trick to flying these is actually throttle control. You need to drop your throttle at the right amount. But we managed to get the boosters off. We keep it going and we limp it up into orbit. Get rid of our big tank. As you can see there by the amount of fuel, we get rid of our big tank a little bit later than we should have. But we do our adjustment burns and we try and get it roughly into the same orbit as the Avatar, but not at the same time, just the same inclination. And then anybody that's seen Matt Lone's videos will recognise this. This is the exact same thing that he used for the base of one of his stations. So with a little bit of shaking, it's in there fairly tight, we managed to get this out. Now I haven't modified this in any way. I'm not going to be using this on its own, but I figured it would be quite useful just the way it is. So there we go, we just leave that in orbit and come back to the planet, and this is the point where I start having a bit of problems. It sort of loops and it's very squirrely on land in this particular shuttle, but we managed to miss the landing. We come up a little bit short, but we come up on the ground at least. So yeah, a shuttle for the first time in a long time, and if anything, a Kerbal stock shuttle. So there you go. So now we've played about with stock, we want to go as modded as possible, and we come out with our next launcher. So this is actually the back that's going to plug onto that station. And this is just going to carry parts. Now the main thing about this is the fuel tanks that are on this module. The fuel tanks are part of the DSEV mod. Again, Angel125 was kind enough to fulfill one of my requests, and he actually made parts with his signature storage mechanism in them. So these can actually be restructured on the fly. You can change them between what they store. At the moment they're liquid fuel and oxygen because I figure I'll need that. And I think one of them is equipment. I don't know what that little noise was. But these are, the reason they're out there is it gives me some flexible storage on the station that I can rework with different things. So I'm just connecting this to the science lab, and then all of this will get pushed out to the Avatar and dock with the Avatar. As you can see there, I've got some ginormous solar panels. Obviously this is going to be out by Joule, so it needs oversized solar panels if you're just running off solar. And you can see my beautiful problem with docking, but we eventually get it docked and out to the Avatar. And then this section's just going to hook onto the back. Now as you can see there, it's got thrusters, but it's also got a rear docking port, and that's because this isn't the only thing I want to send out there. So I want to put a base on the ground, but I also want to leave a station in orbit. And this is the main hub of the station, shall we say. Or at least one of the main hubs. It's going to have, this section itself is going to have all of my science, but as you can see there, it's got a little bit of a hub in the middle to try and connect things. So I just figured I'd keep in the docking because it's not often I sort of leave in these things. But I figured this was going to be a bit of a longer video, so I might leave in a bit extra and just bring it up to a rough half hour or so. I really don't know what that noise is. Oh, I do know what that noise is. It was a blooming sticky keys. Ah! I don't have sticky keys in my system. I managed to pull out most of the stuff, but it still has the activation. So as usually happens with MechJeb, it tries to force itself to dock even though it can't do it. So you just have to turn it off and that solves the problem. And there we go, we have another section plugged onto the back. And we're back out to the Ares. So the Ares is finally coming back to Kerbal. So it is time to wake up the crew. So we bring them out of deep freeze. Oh, that's loud. That'll be down in post-production, but yeah. So we start waking everybody up and then we start checking the science. And when I check the science, I see exactly how much we've got. And it's that much that it takes so long, I can't leave it on for long enough to transmit when I'm doing what I'm doing. And I managed to mess it up. But from there, we go out to Juna. I nearly said Mars there. Now, I was told about this little module. This is a spyglass module for the Pathfinder mod. And Angel was kind enough to tell me that this works as an extraplanetary launch pad's base system. So I decided to hook this onto the side so that I can build some stuff out here, because I'm starting to get to the station building section and I want to put a station out at Duna as well, and I figured why ship it out there when I can build it on the surface. So we lay out all of our stuff and this happens. As you can see in the sort of left of the craft, I have the points, the actual stakes out there. I laid them all out. I didn't film it, but I laid them all out. And yeah, that went sideways. So, that's not working. So I have to come up with another method. And luckily, amongst one of his other mods, I think it's a Heisenberg mod, actually has a way around it. There's a bit of a launch pad. So I decided to put a launch pad on top of my base. I figured this was an interesting way around. So once the launch pad's built, we try the exact same ship again. And this time, it goes horribly wrong. No, I'm only kidding, it doesn't go horribly wrong. So this time we get it built. And voila! It turns out I didn't measure that ship. That is just how close it is to the size of the launch pad. How lucky was that? So we get in our launch pad, a little bit of fuel. And as you can see the little flags on it. If you can see, I hope you want to pay attention. That lovely little flag has got KEK in it, Kerbal Explosive Kolonisation, and it was a brilliant little flag made to me by Crater Cracker? Yeah, Crater Cracker, I got it right. I was thinking Crater Crawler there for a second, like the ship. But Crater Cracker made me those little things on the Kerbal forums, and I thought that was absolutely lovely, so I'll put it on some of my ships. But now we come to the SSTO Phallus. I did not intend to make a space penis, but it came out that way once I had changed the nose cap for this particular nose cap. Angel, if you're watching, please make me another nose cap that doesn't look like a penis. I know that's not easy, but still. Yeah, so this is an SSTO that I designed, and originally it had the docking port on the nose, but it was so aerodynamically unstable it was a nightmare. And now it flies, and it flies really well. But yeah, it looks like a space penis. So we get up to the Ares and we start recovering some of the science. As you can see there, I managed to get, I think it was like 12,000 science off of this one ship, something along those lines. And we grab all of the crew except for the scientists, because there's still data processing in this labs. So I leave the scientists and I think one engineer and one pilot. It might just be one pilot, but I leave them on board and refill a bit of its life support and bring our SSTO back down. And obviously it is an SSTO, so you can usually have a bit more ability to aim it. As you can see, I don't have much fuel for re-entering, but I have a tiny bit, just enough to decelerate when things start cooking, as they are there. And I'm just using the fins to try and steer it just a little bit extra towards the planet. Towards the KSC. Obviously the highest amount we can get is landing on the pad. The next highest amount I believe is landing on the island, the peninsula. The little light section there that you can see. And then you get less and less the further away you land. So I'm aiming for the peninsula because, yeah, the pad's just taking a mick. And we give it a little bit of a flare there, trying to slow it down, flare on the brakes. And again, I thought I'd keep all this in because it's fairly interesting to me, so I figured somebody else would want to see it. And this isn't reset. I am too lazy to quick save and reset my landings to try and make them look pretty, so what you get is what happens first time. If that's a crash and I lose stuff, then I might cut a bit out of it. But providing nobody dies, I'll show the whole thing. Even if some people die, I usually show it, because again, I'm too lazy to go back and refilm it. But we land right next to the monolith. So, now we're on to more ships. Now this is a newer version of my little light launcher. More of a stock thing. So this is the bigger ship in the KNES mode, and if anybody saw what I did in Skunkworks, you'll see the video of me testing this. Now essentially what this is you have the main body which carries 6 Kerbals I believe, and it carries a lot of KISS parts, and then there's a little attachment on the back which is 2 separate tanks. One tank has monopropellant in it for extra manoeuvring, so I can do a lot of different things in orbit, and one of it has life support. So I'm just kicking it on here, and I'm actually going to transfer the life support over to the ship, and then pull in the crew and bring it back. This doesn't have any KISS parts on it, so it's nice and light. I say it doesn't have any KISS parts, it is a KISS part, but it doesn't have anything inside the KISS. I'm just using it as a base launcher. But this little module, one of the things I like doing is making things adaptable so they can be used in other ways, and I hate it when I have to leave a module, drop a module that has fuel in it. So instead of decouplers, I put docking ports on them, so that once I've gone to this, because there's still fuel in this booster module, I can undock and go back to it. And obviously it's got a drone core on it, although it doesn't have any any power generation. It does have a drone core just for manoeuvres for the next sort of 10 minutes once you undock. Now I run out of fuel with it heading to the other one, so it's time to actually drop the thing. But there we go, it gives you a little bit of flexibility if you can redock to parts. So something I always look at, but I don't see a lot of other people doing it. Everybody's about shaving as much weight as possible, and I quite like the adaptability of things. But yeah, so there's a little bit of life support here. So I leave that module, instead of bringing it into the atmosphere, I actually leave it with the ship and just decelerate from there. I've picked up a few extra people, and it's just a bit of a standard. I overshoot as usual, turn round, re-loop, and then land on the ground. If you see the explosive, the Skunk Works version, you'll see how I sort of designed this ship and all the stuff I went through for it. But there we go, simple landing. Now because I got so much science, I just thought I'd keep this in. There's a few parts I'm getting here, I'm just searching through. So I've got basically a lot of the high technology stuff sorted now. And I have an Alcubierre drive at last, it's unlocked. So I go through and scan what I'd like, and then find all the shiny stuff and unlock it. So there's pretty much nothing that's actually unlocked in my thing. There's still some nodes there, but there's nothing in them. So I'm essentially full technology at last, with everything that came back from Juno. And there you just saw the Infinity managing to get back to Kerbal at last. It was a long burn to return, but so we now have the Infinity and the Ares and everything that was out at Juno finally back around Kerbal. Now, this lovely section here, I've decided that the MRS mod is coming out of Kerbal when I upgrade to 131. Basically just because of loading times, nothing to do with the mod, it's a brilliant mod, but I want as short a loading time as possible, so I'm trying to trim down the mods I use, and I don't use too much out of the MRS mod. I haven't actually used anything in 1.3 from it at all, but these ships have some parts of it in, so it's time for a little bit of surgery. So as you can see there, I use MechJeb to dock one ship while messing about with the other. Now this was never designed to dock to something, but I kind of want to put it there just because it's still got fuel in it and it can be useful. So a little bit of a, what I call a manly dock, where you don't have any RCS, you have to do it on burns and things. And as you can see there, I've got a drone core and 2 docking rings. And this part here, if you can see the reaction wheel with the green dot on it, is the part from the MRS mod, and it needs to go. So the docking ports are too big for a Kerbal to handle, even in space. I wish they could change that, but I understand how difficult it would be. So I have to put my KISS container next to it. So I separate the parts and explode the docking wheel, so that's gone. And then I use a Kerbal to push them apart, and then use the KISS attachment system straight from the container, which obviously is the little ship, and use that to connect on my 2 3.5 meter docking ports from the DSEV mod. I then, because I've also removed all the RCS from this, I then attach my lander and use its RCS to try and steer the front section back, which, as you can imagine, with something this heavy and all the RCS being at one end, took a long time. So we skip through that fairly rapidly, and here you see the final connection. Again, all done manually because MechJib can't handle it. It's lopsided and it's a pain. So eventually we managed to get out, and if you remember, I left a little module on the front last time, so I had to take that off to actually connect to it. So that module's here. So I decide to go and grab this and bring them into the atmosphere and then just return them. And as usual with this thing, I overshoot and loop back. It seems to be the best way of landing this. But this is fairly nice and smooth thing. A little bit of a wobble there. Steep re-angle entry. And on with the brakes and a nice smooth landing. So that's a good bit of ship surgery done. So on to the next one. And the next one is coming to Eve. So this is the Hammerhead. So we are approaching Eve and it's time for a deceleration burn. So as the usual thing, I start extending the radiators. Obviously I had to pull some of these in when docking the ship, so there was a bit of humming and hawing there. But I extend them, I turn on the reactor because I need the reactor on to start up these engines because they require a lot of power. So the reactor's on, I start up the engines. Once everything's going, now there was a cut there, so if you're doing this, be aware it'll take longer. But we grab a bit of science because I remember, and we continue with the burn. Then as you can see, things start overheating. So I'm actually cutting the burn here and there. The original burn was about 25 minutes. And then this happens. I run out of fuel. So I have to cut off, swap over the engines so that they're burning water and fusion pellets, which is essentially, the water is my life support. But even at that, they still seem to heat up more, and even with doing intermediate burns, I'm in risk of detonating the tanks. So I have to turn them off, and I decide to use the lander engines because of the way I orientated the lander. This is a possibility, and they're still fairly strong engines, so we use the lander to slow down. Now it takes 3 orbits to go round. I have to go around 3 times and slow down, and I still leave myself in a fairly elliptical orbit once everything's said and done. But we managed to bring ourselves into some form of orbit that I can land for. So that's a sort of good end to the show, as we shall say. So I have this ship at Eve, as you can see there, the eccentricity. And thank you for watching. We'll see what happens next time. Like and subscribe, and see you again.